Welcome to Planetary Intelligence, everyone. And today I have a wonderful guest and dear friend, who I can call a dear friend right now. And he's a author, a acrylic artist, and ink artist, pioneering ink artist, amongst many other skill sets and talents. And I would like to welcome Sol Luckman onto the show. You can check out all his work, which I'll include in the links below. Sol, welcome. Welcome to my channel. Really glad to have you here.
Thank you for having me, Ahmed. It seemed like we only talked the other day, but I was looking forward to round two. We talked on my channel, and um, it's just like we scratched the surface. So I was thinking this would be a good conversation.
Likewise, Sol. Yeah. Really enjoyed our conversation over on your channel. Thank you for having me on as well. Um,
My pleasure.
I would like to obviously, as you are my guest, I would like to get to know you a bit more. And for my guests and those who don't know you and don't know your work, um, just to have a kind of overview of what you're sharing, what you're doing at the moment.
Absolutely, yes. I'm mostly focused on my writing and my artwork. I am bringing out a new book. It's a memoir, so I'm old enough to start dabbling in autobiographical writings. Right.
Yeah.
So I can get away with that just barely. So it's is this book in particular is a combination of my some of my writings and my artwork. It's got something like 150 of my paintings scattered throughout the book, and it's divided into I think 28 rather short chapters with all of that art interspersed. And it's the story of a number of years I spent living on this very eccentric little island in South Carolina, in the low country of South Carolina, called Hilton Head Island.
Mm.
And the book is called Musings from a Small Island. And it's about my experiences there, my family's experiences, being parents, being surfers or body surfers, doing art, writing, and then just having life happen along with hurricanes and evacuations, and being forced to flee the island occasionally because of bad weather. So it's all done in a kind of snarky, philosophical, and humorous way to engage different parts of readers, different aspects of the reader's psyche. So, and then the visual component brings home a lot of what I'm writing, because almost all of the images do have at least a tangential relationship to what's being discussed in that part of the text. Sometimes it's a little more tenuous than others, but sometimes it's a very good illustration of what's going on.
Wow, 150 illustrations. That's quite a lot of work. It sounds like you put into this book.
Well, it's these are my paintings.
Oh, your
So
paintings. I see.
I just did the paintings over a period of years, and then I selected the ones I have. I don't know how many paintings I've done, 400 or 500 paintings. I can't even remember. But I I took that body of work and said, okay, I've written this thing, and how do they go together? And then when I started putting the images in, yes, I did change some of the text, and then and then I realized, oh, I could put this image in if I did this little segue or this tangent, actually work that in. So there was a somewhat of an organic process. I wrote it primarily back in around the 2019 to 2020 window. So it was another one of these funny things that was you know right on the cusp of major world changes. So in some ways it reads like some kind of idyll, some kind of idyllic tale of a forgotten childhood, whatever, before I was initiated into you know the clown show or whatever we've been living for the last several years. So I've been reading it and putting it together and working with my partner Lee to iron it out and edit it and that kind of thing. And it's like, she's like, this is such a quaint, sweet little story in some ways. I'm like, I know, it really is. That
Awesome.
world was so different, and it was only a few years ago.
Yeah. Oh, how our world has changed since 2020. I mean, it's been yeah, it's changed everything, hasn't it? Like you feel like that sort of time before then was idyllic in that way. Even though
Absolutely, yeah.
yeah.
And it's crazy to see it in writing in what is almost a journalistic format. Not, it's not quite, it's divided into chapters. It is a story.
Mm,
It combines some elements of something you might find in like Peter Mayle, A Year in Provence, or combine that with some Anthony Bourdain-esque writing, like from No Reservations, or even Kitchen Confidential, or something like that. That sort of
mm,
voice with John Brent, who wrote Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil. There's a little, I don't know, a little Henry Miller thrown in at times. I mean, there's a lot going on in terms of inspirational voices that I have inside me because I've digested all of this literature for decades of my life now.
mm. Well, I've started reading Kali the Destroyer. Ordered it shortly after our talk, and I only got round to reading it a few days ago. And I tell you, I was straight in there. I mean, it's so beautifully written and so fluid to read. It's very easy, and the pacing is so great as well. So I've really enjoyed your writing and kind of being introduced to your work and your world. You know, the worlds you create with
Oh,
these beautiful books and storytelling.
yeah, it's sometimes it's a lonely thing to be engaged in, and sometimes that's exactly what you want, and other times you would love more connections. I mean, how to connect with an audience is a writer's sort of perennial double-edged question,
Mm,
but I really, really appreciate that feedback. I know a lot of people have enjoyed Callie, and they liked Snooze, which are somewhat similar books of they're sort of sci-fi visionary fiction tales about ultimately about sort of enlightenment and transcendence, I suppose.
mm,
But that's a twisted path to get to that point in those books, and I really I really enjoy delving into the psychology of my characters a
mm,
lot and treating it as if it were happening in this quote unquote reality, right? Like, I'm not here to just write a fantasy story about supernatural beings, even though Callie is a supernatural being, as you'll probably figure out.
mm,
Um, but I want her to be very human at the same time and have identifiable issues and problems and that sort of thing. It was also fascinating in Callie the Destroyer, which is spelled with a C, if anyone's out there, Callie. It was really interesting to write from a girl's point of view, a young woman's point of view, and to bring that bring that through. It's like, oh my gosh, oh, I can do this. I can actually do it. I had some experience with that in Snooze, where I had a character named Tuesday. Her name is actually Tuesday Monday,
oh, right.
and so she's a very funny character. She's sort of my Luna Lovegood from Harry Potter. She's that kind of character, and she really kind of jumps off the page according to a lot of people. And she really does seem like she's a girl and growing into a young woman. And I said to myself after that, I think I could probably write a whole book from the point of view of a female, not narrator, but a female point of view. And lo and behold, I ended up doing it, and it ended up being, I think it might be longer than Snooze. I can't remember which book is longer. They're close in length.
Yeah, it's about 400 odd pages, or if I remember correctly. Cali.
Yeah, Snooze is
Yeah.
too. It might be Snooze is just a few pages longer. I think Snooze is close to 500 pages, and then
Mm.
Callie's 20 or 30 or 40 pages less than that.
Wow, amazing. I look forward to reading the rest of it. Um, Here's a question for you. Does art imitate life or life imitate art?
Oh man. That's really really funny. Um, oh gosh. This is something that I would love for you to indulge me on. I will share something about this that's from my forthcoming book, Beginner's Luke. If you'll just let me just bring it out, because
Yep.
this is exactly what this is about. And I hate it when I have to like come up on with something on the spot and I've already written about it. Like it's exactly something, it's the way I wanted to say it. So
By all means.
let me just see if I could find it. Let me see if that's right. Okay, all right. So, all right. So he's writing this moment. There's this metafictional moment where my narrator, Luke, is writing his life. He's an imaginary character, and he catches up with himself in the story so that he is now living in the present. So he's not telling you his imagined past, but now he's in the present living it.
Right.
So this the moment when that happens, and he says the separation between art and life has broken down.
Mm.
I'm living even as I write, and writing even as I live. Indeed, these very words, the ones that have just entered your brain via your optic nerve, like keys opening perception's doors, only to realize the words themselves in thought, bring into being what they purport to represent. Yours truly. Thus, in fiction, rhetoric becomes reality. So here we are, my friend, just the two of us, reader and writer, united at last. You know as much about where this narrative is headed next as I do, which isn't saying a heck of a lot. My references to future episodes, such as Europe, Brazil, and even the Buddha, were just idle conjecture. Let me come clean and shoot you straight. This is as far as I've imagined. Don't you just love the giddy electrification, the headlong rush, the spine-tingling thrill of authorial omniscience? Omniscience. It's merely a fancy word for ignorance, isn't it?
Wow.
I don't know if I answered your question, but I
Yeah,
at
no,
least
that's quite a bit to digest there, but it is I can see where you're coming from. Wow. So in the pre you feel like it's both in a way?
I just feel like we're in an imaginative continuum and we tell ourselves that some things are reality and some things are imagination, but really it's all being
Mm,
created. And the way that we create in this world, it's not, I don't believe it's the only way one can create somewhere, somehow, but we create through language.
mm,
We model the entire world and our perceptions through language. So, one of the things that one is doing, let's say in the shamanism work that you and I have discussed, is you're learning how to get out of the language modeling
yep.
and to begin creating other experiences. But if you're talking about a more or less shared perceptual framework that we're all operating in, we're modeling that together through language.
Mm,
And I do believe it's possible to use one of the areas where I suppose I disagree with Castaneda and Don Juan and my understanding of how things work is that I believe that the universe was actually spoken into being, that
yeah.
it was language, but that it was a kind of sacred language. And in my work with regenetics, I have associated that with a language that has elsewhere been called the language of the birds. And it is composed purely of vowels. There are no consonants. The consonants introduce duality into the human experience because they separate the flow of vowels. They create compartmentalization within our experience.
Mm,
So when we begin modeling our reality here on the human plane, we create a dualistic, compartmentalized, very cryptic experience for ourselves. But that the higher language that initially created more of a paradise in this
mm,
world was drawing from principles having to do with unity and harmony. And even though language was, I believe, being used to bring that world into being, it was more like what the Castaneda might describe as the eagle's emanations, the feelings that are being generated by the creator, which you could
mm,
say are type of emotional language. And maybe they actually have a sound. Maybe they sound like a bunch of vowels floating around.
Mm,
That's one because even in seeing, it's very clear. Don Juan is very clear that people, when you see the energy of the universe or the world, you don't necessarily see it with your eyes. You can hear it. You can
mm,
feel it. You can experience it on your skin. It's not just a visual thing. A lot of people get tripped up by that description in the Castanedan shamanism of seeing as something that's done exclusively through the eyes, and it's
mm,
not. It's never actually done with the eyes. At best, it's through an inner sight. But there are other quote unquote senses that can be brought to bear on that experiential realm.
mm. Yeah, again, when you say the word, and the beginning was the word, it says it in the Bible as well. And uh, I'm reminded of cymatics and how sound is the predecessor to the to light itself. You know, in this
Absolutely.
in everything in the realm in everything that we perceive.
I believe
Sound
there's
always
a
precedes it.
I was going to ask you, somewhere in my memory bank, I recall there being something to that effect in the Quran. Do you recall that? Something about the relationship between light and sound in creation?
Yeah, there is a verse on there. I can't recall exactly, but it also talks about sound, like the word or the I think meant the wave of the sound preceding light or preceding creation.
Yes, that's what I
Yeah,
remember. It's
yeah.
like the universe rang like a bell almost. That was the
It,
imagery,
it was
and then
metaphorical. Yeah, it was
burst
definitely
out of that.
metaphorical.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I can't remember from the top of my head because I haven't had the whole the whole Quran memorized because it's such a vast book. But I know which one you're talking about. It just does mention it
Yes, so
from
you
my
could say,
memory.
I mean, even in the Bible, when it says "Let there be light,"
Yeah.
I've I've brought this up many times. The whole creation scenario is embedded in that concept because the what is bringing the light into being is a sentence with spoken with sound, presumably.
Yep.
It's like abracadabra, and then you get the light or the effect of that spell casting that's going on to create, the motion of the universe. I've published articles by a lot of people that speak to this. A lot of this research I've put in my books, Conscious Healing and Potentiate Your DNA. I
Mm,
know physicist Richard Allen Miller and his ex-wife Iona Miller wrote a beautiful article about this exact phenomenon, about the different physics theories that have to do with this idea of a kind of sonic substrate that then is somehow galvanized to sort of holographically project what we perceive as the physical world.
mm,
So it's
yep.
like a two-step process. Well, in some ways, it's like a three-step process. You start with nothing. You start with that total silence of the Godhead or the eagle or the creator source, and then something moves that being to speak, metaphorically perhaps, but maybe not. And then that act immediately engenders light, and
Mm,
then it creates the holographic construct of the world in a period of time, 7 days or whatever it might be.
yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing with a drop going into water. This it's the sound that's creating the ripples rather than the actual um, matter of it itself, like being the ripple. It's the sound that's creating the ripple.
Absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
all the scientific research that you mentioned is the vibrational research. And I mean, in fact, Richard Gerber wrote a book years ago that was very popular in for healers and in I guess in the 90s probably. And he was an MD, if I recall correctly, who had been studying all kinds of alternative medicine across different modalities and continents and that sort of thing. And he ended up deciding to call the book Vibrational Medicine because it was an encompassing term.
Mm.
for so many of the things that were being done out there.
Mm. Yeah, well, I can see that. I mean, even speaking yourself to being better, or to feeling better when you're ill, you're kind of like setting that those words that you're saying is already. It's the same thing when you're around somebody, someone who's speaking negatively to you or speaking positively to you, you'll feel that. You'll feel the vibrational changes within your field, um, or within your informed field, as Jason calls it. So
Yes,
there is an experiential fact to that, you know, in the
I agree.
in the experiencing of it, right? So everyone feels that. We all share that as individuals in the world. We all feel and share that experience together. Um, so
I
that
think there's a morphic quality to it. You're talking about this shared experience, Rupert Sheldrake's work, the morphic field, the morphogenetic fields or morphic fields, like shared data banks of perhaps hyperdimensional energy that holds holds 3D together, like 4D energy that holds 3D together, sort of thing. And you can encode information on all of that, like when shamans do all of these rituals and they speak these words and they've done it for thousands of years and they put so much intent and power into it, they are galvanizing, energizing the morphic field. So
mm,
here, centuries, millennia, perhaps later, you you say those words, you reenact some of those healing rituals. They can be extremely loaded with effectiveness because of all of the consciousness that's riding morphically on top of that act or those words.
mm. I mean, it kind of reminds me about DNA and this and the idea of the spiral. There's always a sort of um, how do you say, like the DNA structure is almost when if you flatten out the spiraling DNA into a flat piece, either codes the DNA codes within there the structure of the DNA itself. It's almost like, yeah, have you seen those readers in the music, when they play music? You have those kind of readers. They almost
Oh,
look
like
like
the visualizers.
the ones that when when you wind them, they're like chimed instrument. It plays like whatever it reads off the paper or the card.
I have
It-
actually not. Oh, yes, like old school instruments,
yeah,
right? Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, sure, sure. Yep.
yeah. So it kind of reminds me of that. Like there's a code to the way our DNA is forming. It's like the DNA is the sheet music to the music you're going to hear, and from that it gives that form and feeling,
Yeah, I like
through
that
that.
a lot. I mean, are you aware that my two my two nonfiction books, they're about DNA and about different,
Yes.
you know, so like one of my favorite writers or favorite books on this subject was written by a guy named Jeff Ward, and he wrote a book called Spirals, The Pattern of Existence. I'll read you a little quote about exactly what you're talking about if you're interested.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, by all means. Yeah, we'd love to hear it.
It's from Jeff Ward, Spirals, The Pattern of Existence. The spiral is the sign of the eternal, creative, unifying, and organizing force or principle at work in the universe, and especially of the ongoing creation of consciousness. It is a divine mark on nature, what may be termed God's personal signature on the cosmos, the great architect's own autograph. From the cradles of stars and planets and the awesome spiral arms of the galaxies to the beautiful double helix structure of the DNA molecule. As the spiral seems to be integral to physical growth, so it is also the symbolic pattern of human spiritual growth. The spiral is as much part of our cultural DNA as it is part of our biological DNA. Indeed, I have come to realize that spirality, the condition of being spiral, and reality are almost interchangeable terms.
Wow. Yeah, and you see, like in the ancient sort of druidic culture, you always see the spiral, don't you, as well? The symbol of the
Yeah, or
spiral,
even
one of the
like
most ancient
petroglyphs,
symbols.
shamanic petroglyphs out in the western United States. I used to live out in Taos, New Mexico, and I remember um, I lived on this river we had a little swimming hole down in this desert river cutting through the high desert mesa, and there were all these rocks, that were river rocks that had been there for I don't know how long. And I remember kind of stumbling behind some of these river rocks one time as I was walking down towards our swimming hole, and I was like, "What's back there?" And I went sort of a different path, and I got back there, and there were these old glyphs, and one of them was like a kind of spiral with some sun rays coming off of it. It was all, it could have been very old. I don't know for sure, but there were glyphs all over that area.
Wow.
Back a very, very long time. And other places in Utah and whatnot, you see spirals and weird things that look like that blue spiral that happened years ago in Norway, these very strange types of energies or something. You see them just constantly, almost as if it's a letter of that alphabet, whatever that is. And I say that in quotes, alphabet.
Hmm. Yeah, it makes you think about how the nature of why spirals, the symbol of spirals, were so important to the ancients. Yeah, especially in the West, predominantly in the West, because these symbols are seen in the West, in the Western Hemisphere at least. They're found
I
on
would, I
Ireland
would,
and
I would
Scotland.
argue. Oh, you're saying that where are they seen in Scotland in the architecture or?
Well, in the old kind of monolithic structures in the stones, from ancient
Oh
times,
yeah,
preceding the
yes.
flood. Yeah.
That's a really good point. I mean, if you look down on something like Stonehenge, I mean, there are circular patterns, but you can kind of extrapolate different designs that come out, and that if the full monument were set up, it might have more of a spirality looked at from above. I was thinking about the Eastern version of this would be the yin yang symbol. It really is just a spiral
Oh yeah.
codified into a symbol.
Yeah, that's very true, actually. It has a spiral. Yeah, it is a spiral, isn't it? Well, two spirals, yeah, going into each other,
Yeah, maybe something
ultimately.
almost like toroid spirals infusing each other, almost like the energy of the heart or something like that.
Right. Yeah. One has to wonder what the ancients knew about the meaning behind that. I mean, one can also look at the DNA. Well, with DNA is always spiraling, isn't it? In its own way, it's twisted into a sort of spiral shape. It's always spiraling
Yeah,
when we
yes.
see it. So maybe that's the code to creation. Everything has a spiral to it. Um, and I don't know about you. Have you ever experienced kind of having an experience, but coming back to it a few years later, but experiencing it differently?
In what way?
Just in a way that maybe someone you've met, or just an experience that's kind of repeated itself, but
Mm.
it's come
Mm.
back in a different form, or you've experienced it in a different form a few years later. Have you ever had that experience?
It's really common. In fact, Lee and I have talked for years about how our maturation process in life has resembled a spiral staircase, and we keep coming back to the same point, but we're a little higher up. And you're
Right.
revisiting, the same things kind of over and over, but with a different perspective. I mean, even in the recapitulation that you do in shamanism, very often you recapitulate the same person or situation or trauma over and over. And it's almost as if each time you go a little deeper, a little more profoundly into whatever that represents, or whatever energy is connecting you to it. So that's a little higher up in a way. I mean, you're going deep in that analogy, but if you just flip it, you're going up the spiral.
Right.
So
It
have you
is.
had experiences like that?
Yes, I have. I have. That's why I thought I'd ask. I thought, like it seems that, that seems to be a common thing amongst those who are maturing in that way and who notice these things. Um, who are on the sort of individualist, highly individualized path. Uh, you know, speaking as a sort of immortal soul rather than the collective. You kind of notice experiences and you come back to them and you meet certain people. Some people would look like certain people from the past or have certain features, but they will behave the same way, but you see it in a different way. You relate to them in a different way. Um, or experiences as well, like coming back to places you used to go to when you were younger and experiencing it in a different way. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's like when I was younger, um, going to having to go to nightclubs and stuff like that. And I detest going to those places now, absolutely detest it. It disgusts me. But not long ago, there was an event, a sort of non-alcoholic, uh, uh, it was called, it was called All About Love. And it was just artists coming together, and there was no alcohol involved, but they hired the nightclub to do it in. And so it's all like sober dancing, and music and artists displaying their work, and there was all sorts of medicine things going on there as well, and therapy. So I just went into this nightclub experiencing this completely different experience. So it was quite it brought a smile to our face, because I was very apprehensive of going in the first place to go there, because of the nature of those places energetically as well. But having gone there, I met a guy who was from one of the South American tribes from Mexico. Who was, he's a shaman himself, and he was there like with a drum, dressed in his his shaman gear, and it was really kind of like completely changed my reality and view of it. So yeah,
How
um,
long ago was that?
this was about just over a week ago. Yeah.
Oh, good. Very recent.
Yeah, very recent. That's why the theme of spirals and coming to have some, having a new experience within a place that you've experienced that like the spiral thing seems to happen in my life. And evidently it has for you as well, and your partner. So
Absolutely, absolutely. And I just
yeah.
think it keeps happening, really. I mean, does one ever get out of the spiral? I don't know, really, I know you talked about the relationship between spiral and sort of the bedrock of creation. There's a book called Pirates of the Sacred Spiral that Leonard Horowitz wrote years ago about DNA, and I
Right.
read that and cited that in my work, and it just really makes a point that yeah, that is what's going on. The DNA is sort of this basic unit of creation. It's also imprinting us with cultural or social experiences. And there you get into the morphic stuff, the idea that before the DNA comes into being, there's an energy wave that gives rise to it, and that's back to the morphic, hyperdimensional, hyperspatial, however you want to look at the wave genetic piece of all of this. There's amazing research that's been done in wave genetics over the last 20 or 30 years, by a couple of scientists. One of them is named Peter Garayev. He just died a few years ago, and he and some of his colleagues, they ended up theorizing that essentially what we have is uh, we have like a hyperspatial kind of 4D realm where the codes or the templates are stored for the creation of our bodies and
Right.
ultimately the creation of everything else. But just speaking about DNA, they're theorizing that you have this wave, this field of energy that is a kind of conscious, intelligent, in essence, programmable field of energy. Guess what? It's sound based and it's language based. And then that then materializes into what we think of as molecules and cells and tissues and organs and all of that, through a kind um, of almost like a program that rolls out in this world. And they're not thinking necessarily in terms of simulation, but you can see the
Mm.
parallels. I mean, it's really remarkable to think of things this way. Um, so what's super empowering that I really grabbed a hold of with both hands when I was sick and trying to heal myself from getting some travel sticks back in the day.
Mm.
I I just understood that, oh my gosh, we can use language to speak to that field and ask it to change whatever has gone wrong.
Mm.
And then when you do that, then it begins to run a different program, and it's a healing program all of a sudden. And your body can heal, your mind can heal, it can release trauma, it can change the direction of your life, give you more energy. I mean, I saw all of this in myself, and then working with clients for forever now, for 2 decades or so. It's really
Wow.
remarkable. So that's the theory behind the regenetics work that Lee and I developed.
Is this what your book is about? Potentiate your DNA, and the one preceding that one, is this what it's about? Like
Mhm.
in terms of like changing your health through changing the way you talk about it, and you speak to it. Is that part of it?
Not exactly.
Right.
It's closely related. What happened was when I was really sick and I was
Mm.
dying, whatever I had even had some. I want to say it had some very, very autoimmune elements to it, like severe autoimmune elements. we
Wow.
we we were led to Brazil, where I had been previously, but we were led back there, and we had a series of, I would call them, very shamanic experiences. Literally, we were chased by weather spirits. I mean, the whole 9 yards. It was like living Castaneda or something. I mean, I remember walking through, a Brazilian town through 4 feet of water, and all this kind of, and this kind of thing just kept happening. It was almost as if either something was trying to stop us from doing what we were doing, or that it was trying to help us, and didn't, we didn't know how to use that energy or whatever, but we were very aware of just all kinds of wild serendipity and stuff going on. Long story short, we had a kind of visionary experience when we were at the ocean in this town called Buzios in Rio de Janeiro state, in which three lights appeared out over the ocean and popped into our bodies.
Wow.
And at the time, I thought after that, our child was conceived, but I thought I was sterile from my illness and jabs and things. And suddenly I wasn't, and so he was conceived right around the same time. And so the third light, we think, was maybe him, and it was almost like we were receiving our inner, like our higher selves, or some aspect of energy from another dimension associated with us, was coming to connect with us and to lead us forward on this healing path and teach us how to do it. And what we got from that experience, immediately, was a series of vowels
Mm.
that came in a set of like 5 lines, double lines, with a top line and a bottom line. And we were given to understand that you were to sing or chant the top line of vowels together, and then underneath that you think a different line of vowels. So you're using sound and light at the same time,
Mm.
speak to your DNA and your energy field.
Wow, that is incredible. Yeah, it
If you
goes to
read
sh
if you read far enough into Kali the Destroyer, there's a chapter where I fictionalize this exact phenomenon.
amazing. Yeah, I look forward to reading that, but yeah, it's certainly like fascinating. The power of the word and the vibration, but also your experience. I mean, that the thing with the lights, that's incredible as well. It kind of, well, again, it redefines reality, doesn't it? You know, like there is a benefactor or something watching over you in a way, uh,
Yeah,
watching out
absolutely.
for
And
you.
then
Yeah.
experience that with somebody else. We weren't on drugs, we weren't drunk. We were just called to the beach. By these same spiritual energies that had been following us all through Brazil as we were, traveling around, trying to find, the right place. We felt like we were being led somewhere, and eventually, boom, there we were, and this thing happened. And then that very night, we started, getting these energies in that were these healing energies, and I was unable to eat practically anything. I could only eat basically unseasoned meat and vegetables. My allergies were so severe, and
Wow.
almost immediately after performing this work on ourselves in the days that followed, I began to be able to eat foods again that I hadn't been able to eat in years, and I began detoxing a lot, all this crazy stuff. I mean, sci-fi stuff started coming out of me.
Wow.
Uh, yeah, like wild, wild stuff. And Lee also had a lot of really amazing effects, like her scoliosis from childhood started to straighten, and it did straighten to a certain degree. And I mean, all kinds of amazing things happened to both of us. And then this process went on for a very long time. We ended up receiving subsequent activations that helped us to go to different levels in our healing. And so the work evolved from a single activation called potentiation, thus potentiate your DNA, to a four-part method called the regenetics method.
Right. Wow, I'll certainly have to check that out. It sounds like you've been on that path for quite some time.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, not by choice or not by conscious choice. It was more like desperation.
Yeah. Well, sometimes our health forces us to do that, to go on that path. Um, it kind of makes me wonder as well a lot about this reality as well, isn't it? A big part of it is to do with healing as well, um, as opposed to just coming to experience it. A lot of people tend to go through healing journeys, uh, in their sort of awakening, so to speak. Um, I don't know. Do you find that also being valued?
I do, absolutely. I don't think this is a throwaway experience at all. And I don't think it's a given that we automatically reincarnate or that we pop out in an avatar outside of a simulation. I don't think any of that's a given. I think we have to live as if this is what we've got and we
Yep.
make the most of it. And thus healing is very, very important.
Yeah. No, I totally
And
agree.
I think not living that way, um, not trying to maximize your experience, to maximize your health, is is to in some ways not really honor your life and your potential. And I'm not saying we can't party and have fun and do things to let our hair down, metaphorically, whatever. I'm really
Yeah.
not saying that, but that can be healthy, especially if you need to just unwind. But what I am saying is that balance is required. Balance is so integral to healing, and so many people are out of balance, and thus they have dis-ease because they're just not centered. So back to the spiral. I think the spiral is this imagery of being centered.
Mm. Right,
It's
like the eye
where
of the storm, so to
everything kind
speak.
of, yes, it's where the world rotates around you. You're not chasing it. You are in the center. I mean, all of your martial arts training, that is a key concept in every
Mm.
martial art form of martial arts that I've ever looked at.
Yeah, it's universal. It comes back to uh being in your center ultimately. It's like when you're in that center, whether you're sparring with somebody else or you're doing certain martial movements and the whole thing, your best balance when you actually find that center point and that state of inner uh, inner peace, I guess. You know, there's no conflict anymore. There's no friction.
I like
You're fighting without fighting, as Bruce Lee says. That's what he named his art, the art of fighting without fighting.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah, he really, I mean, he had some amazing things to say. I've shared some of his memes over recent months that speak to the need to be, balanced, or to be in a still point while in movement. That's kind of the gist of some of his thinking, is that, you can't expect to really be a great fighter if you're reacting to
Yep.
anything. You're so still that you are anticipating, you're seeing it before it even happens. It's almost like a kind of ESP or shamanic seeing that you engage. Is that fair to say from your experience?
Yeah, totally. Totally. It is that you're no longer seeing with the eyes anymore. You are seeing with your body, you're seeing with everything. It no longer becomes a visual thing either, you know, because you're already sensing, for example, in that state, if I say I was to spar somebody and I managed to tap into that, I've been able to, and I have managed to tap into it. I've been able to read the movements before it's even happened. So you can almost predict pretty much what's coming, and you're able to already. It's like a game of chess, but without knowing that you've already taken all the pieces down. There's no one, you're not playing anyone except for yourself.
Yeah, that's really, really cool. It makes me think that what's happening there is a form of shamanic seeing where you're actually reading the energy that then creates the movement.
Right,
So that by the time someone is in movement, you've seen it because you've seen what's causing the movement to begin with.
right. Yep.
And I say see, of course, not necessarily with your eyes, but with that shamanic seeing that we were discussing earlier.
Yeah. What got you into the shamanic path? What kind of like propelled you into that direction?
Oh yeah, that's a really good question. Many things over the years just kept propelling me in that direction. When I got really sick in graduate school back in the 90s and ended up changing my life, dropping out of graduate school and trying to heal myself, I had a series of connections that plugged me into a Qigong teacher out in New Mexico who
Right.
was who had healed himself of something kind of similar to what I was dealing with, something like chronic fatigue or fibromyalgia or worse. And and I went out and spent a month training with him, doing primarily just qigong, and began to feel a little bit better. And this is also where I was beginning to read Castaneda and do all other things. I mean, I just hit a group of people and a kind of culture or subculture where all of this stuff was available, and everything else had failed me. I had tried to avail myself of allopathic medicine to get well, and that was a disaster and a farce. And
Mm,
I was really wide open, maybe too wide open. I think some people just when they switch directions, they just go into it totally. But in my case, I learned a lot, and I spent a lot of time. I spent a full year out there just doing daily qigong for like several hours a day, just to try to get back on my feet. And a
mm,
lot of standing at stake, hugging the tree to cultivate my chi reserves and that sort of thing. So I wasn't really doing this to become a martial artist or learn how to fight or anything like that. I was just trying to survive. Meanwhile, I was reading and learning, and when you're out in the Western United States, and especially in the parts of New Mexico where I was, I mean, shamanism is just so everywhere. I mean, and I don't really mean New Age shamanism. I mean like the real thing is like all
mm.
over the place. Just there's so many brujos and shamans and curanderos. I mean, it's just crazy. It's absolutely insane. So you're constantly inundated with this, and then when I ultimately was still sick, or I had some things that happened to me that made me very unwell again, and I wasn't able to get back on my feet with qigong or things that I had been doing. This is where I began looking more deeply into the DNA concept, and I read a book in particular, several books, but I read a book called the DNA and the Cosmic. No, it's called The Cosmic Serpent: DNA and the Origin of Knowledge by this French anthropologist named Jeremy Narby. It's an absolutely brilliant book, and he does a really wonderful job of showing how it's possible that a lot of these shamans, these ayahuasqueros, and that kind of thing, who are
Mhm.
healing people, are actually in communication with the spirit of DNA, and the spirit of ayahuasca is actually connected to that, and they're being given sound and light codes to seeing and think to the DNA, and then these people get well.
Wow.
Meanwhile, I was sort of taken under the wing of this Egyptian mystery school, and I can't really name which one it was. I agreed never to talk about this, and so I'm not going to. But that
Mm,
was wild, and they gave me all of this esoteric, hermetic knowledge that they weren't even supposed to pass along to non-initiates. This was like a big no-no, but they were given very clear guidance from their mother, the real head honcho of this worldwide organization, that they
mm,
were to give this to me. And so I ended up getting all of these perspectives on vowels and DNA, the nature of the energy body, something called the fragmentary body, which is sort of, you know, below the solar plexus chakra. It's in the exact area where in the Castaneda shamanism you die, when the energy opens up, or if you're using your power, that's where your will comes out as in these luminescent fibers, and you can use your power to do things. But it's
mm,
also wide open, like people are walking around this world with it blasted open by all kinds of different things, whether that's pharmaceuticals or bad food or
right.
relationship, or the
Mm,
way they spend their attention or just whatever. But people are walking around just leaking energy out of that. And that's in this tradition that I was plugged into. This is called the fragmentary body. And so we were taught that there's a way to use this knowledge about vowels and singing and thinking and that sort of thing to seal or to close the fragmentary body so that you're not just leaking energy all over the place. And when you do, your energy just builds up over
mm,
time. Like Kundalini just literally fills you like you're a glass.
wow.
And you're just full of energy. It's amazing. It's an amazing experience when it occurs in people.
That's interesting that you mentioned the Hermetic, or should I say um yeah, the Hermetic, because obviously Egypt, whenever Egypt is mentioned, I always think of the Hermetic teachings, which I think I've mentioned to you before, you know, comes before the Gnostic teachings,
Yes.
because they're far more ancient, and I feel like that's where a lot of the Gnostic teachings draw from as well. Um,
You're right about that.
yeah, I mean, what are your thoughts as well? Having mentioning the Gnostics, um, obviously, like your book, Kali the Destroyer, obviously is heavily influenced, I can see, by the Sethian Gnostic mythology, of I guess John Lam Lash, his work as well.
Absolutely, not in his image.
Yeah, where do you can I ask you? So where do you see the benefits of that mythology, and do you see any pitfalls in that mythology, or in your opinion, in your view?
Oh, yeah, that's a really good question. The first thing I would love to point out is that what we have of the Gnostic writings is fragments of fragments.
Right,
So we are working with so little information, it's very hard to get an absolutely clear picture of what they actually believed and what they were actually doing. So there's a lot of conjecture, a lot of creative license that people take when they're piecing together Gnosticism. What is
right,
Gnosticism? That's why you can have people thinking that it's some kind of Christian text on the one hand, Elaine Pagels, the Gnostic Gospels, this sort of thing, and that's what Jason seems to believe, for example. But then John Lamb Lash would say that's complete bullshit. That the Gnostics were the original anti-Christians, and they were trying to tell the Christians that they were full of shit, basically. And Gnostikoi or something like that meant know it all. And that's what the Christians called the Gnostics, because the Gnostics were always saying, you don't understand. You're worshiping a false god, like the Demiurge or AIX or whatever. They're really the only divine being here, on that scale, is the goddess, which is the actual planet that you're living on. So I think, Lash took this, and he talks about the archons and about how the archons were created. His ultimate thrust is a kind of deep ecology where he's wanting people to respect the environment and respect the mother and to take care of that environment and the mother. And that creates for him balance, harmony, sustainability, real permaculture, that sort of thing that allows us to survive and thrive as a species, right?
right.
Um, what I think it's done in his case, it's also kind of locked him down into an idea that this world is a little more real than I'm comfortable with, that there's something solid to it. Like I'm comfortable with the idea
Materialism. He says everything is material, doesn't
it's
he?
material, it's
Yeah.
material, and you know, that runs really contrary to even the shamanic teachings that I'm familiar with, that we really are just energy beings. And so the planet itself would be a vast energy being. And
Right.
it doesn't mean that you can't love the planet, love your mother, and benefit from that relationship. In fact, there are specific techniques to connect with the earth, to honor the earth, to bury yourself in the earth for healing and giving away your illnesses or your traumas, your negative experiences to the earth, who will take them and help you as a mother might, to for a suffering child in this case. So I like to put the two together because I think that everything is ultimately energy, that really there is no such thing as the material, and that it's just grosser, denser forms of energy as we come into quote unquote materialism, but that everything is a perspective, everything is malleable, realities change and shift. And just because we're on one version of the mother doesn't mean that when we shift our assemblage point, we're not on a different version of the planet or the
Right.
realm, whatever you want to call it. So I think that all of that is shifting because all of it is this fluid interchange of energy fields that are constantly interacting and inter-informing.
Mm.
I have no idea if I even answered your question, but I got off on a little bit of a rant.
No, no, it's giving me a clearer picture of how you see it. Yeah, I'm just seeing
What
where
about you?
you see the
How do you feel
benefits.
about that? Because you would the way you phrased your question, you would suggest that you see some inherent pitfalls in the Gnostic model, which I wouldn't disagree with.
Yeah, yeah, that I just wanted to see your views on it, really, where you see, because I see the benefits of it too, but I also see the pitfalls. Um, and notably, yes, the materialistic factor that John Lamlash has brought into it, what one can critique, but again, he's entitled to his views, his personal views, but he is working through the material, like you said, the material that is there is very broken up, and we don't have a full picture of the Gnostics. Um, Yet at the same time, we do have a lot of Gnosticism cults going around today that seem to um, think they know everything.
Right, right.
Well, they don't. Clearly,
Yeah,
there's
that's
obviously some
true.
pitfalls, some errors
I
there.
mean, obviously John is a major writer, fantastic writer. Not in His Image is a great book. He was hugely
Totally.
influential on me, and I cite that in my acknowledgments to Kali the Destroyer because I'm basically providing a fictionalized account of his fallen goddess Gnostic scenario, right?
Yep.
What I'm doing in Kali the Destroyer, and I'm creating characters around that. So there's Sophia, the Gaia is a character. Her consort, Thelete, another Eon, one of these gods, is a character in the book, right? That's what I'm
Right.
doing there. So clearly, very, very influenced, but I'm also a critic of many of his positions, and don't feel that it speaks to the fullness of my experience in this realm, which a lot of it goes way outside the realms of materialism.
Right. And that's where the shamanic, or the Toltec shaman wisdom that comes in for you. Is that where you kind of go further out from the Gnostic teachings to that realm?
Well, it is in some ways. I mean, the funny thing is that to the best of my knowledge, even John Lash, liked Castaneda's work. I'm not exactly sure how those things fit together because they seem a little bit like apples and oranges to me. Um, but certainly the various forms of shamanism. I mean, there's a whole other lineage that we haven't even talked about, which is the Tol lineage of the Toltecs in Mexico. That's the principal spokesperson for that is Sergio Magana, who's written books on Toltec dreaming and that sort of thing. And it is a very different shamanic path in certain ways from the Castaneda Don Juan material. And in other ways, you can see how they have to be cousins. They are related to these ancient traditions. If anything, Sergio's work does a lot to substantiate a lot of what you get in Castaneda's work, his writings.
Right. Kind of reminds me of the old Chinese proverb, there's many paths to the top of the mountain, but the view is just the same.
Yeah, yep,
Yeah.
yep. Spokes to the center of the wheel. You could follow any of these paths. I mean, John Lamb Lash is adamantly against this concept. He believes that he has discovered the one true truth, which is the goddess in that relationship, and anybody who's not on that path is on the wrong path. And he's believed that for
Wow.
years. And I've always found that to be highly distasteful, just to be
Yeah.
total.
Well, then you become no different than the religionists that he proclaims to abhor and go against completely, especially the
It's true.
Christian faith. So
Yeah,
so
it's true. I
it
mean, so
contradicts that, doesn't it?
it absolutely does. I mean, he is a very complicated person. His mind is encyclopedic and absolutely amazing in a lot of ways. And his work, like I said, is extraordinary, very thought provoking. I would recommend that anyone engage that book in particular, not in his image. Some of his later philosophical work I'm not so into. I think he got a little extreme in some ways that did not feel comfortable to me.
Right.
But so I want to give credit and honor him as a great teacher, but I don't disagree. I don't agree with everything he has to say by any means.
Totally. Yeah, no, thank you for sharing that. I've had a small kind of interaction with John Lamlash a few years ago. Um, and it was while I was part of this sort of delusional group, should I say? It was a bit delusional channel called the Gnostic Takeover. Now I see the error of my ways, so to speak. I was kind of misled down that path, but he was approached, and he kind of like was asking us questions, and I felt like he was like a cult leader almost. But
Yes.
this is my personal experience. That was my sort of way of looking at it, the way he carried himself, so to
Mm.
speak. It felt like that, very
Was he there in
egotistical.
person or was this online?
This was online. Yeah, this was just online and via Zoom call that I managed to see in the private, with one of the the channel owner, and in
Was that the
private.
channel that was heavily into the Calico War Party?
No, what was that about? Sorry.
This is what John came up with something like over a decade ago. This kind of anarchic war party to try to throw a wrench in the machinations of the machine and the deep state and that kind of thing, and also going after anybody who disagreed with Lash or anything like that. It ended up being some of my friends got caught in the crossfire. I had an
Right.
astrologer who was sort of channeling the Mahavidyas and all this kind of thing, and he just hated her and went after her with such venom.
Wow.
It was just very, very interesting. So anyone who's sort of stepping on his turf, like you were saying, like a cult leader, could end up, um, offending him. And then, I mean, if he ever hears this, maybe he'll feel the same way about me. But at least I think I did a pretty good job of staying fairly true to his storyline in my book. So I
Yeah.
honored his vision in that way.
No, I honor his contribution greatly. I mean, like you said, Not in His Image was one of the greatest books I've read on the subject, and um, I'm grateful to him for the time he's dedicated to it. But one can always see, like whoever it is, one can always have their own views, and take the useful what's useful, and leave out what doesn't apply, because we have to become conscientious, and at the same time very aware of how dogma can easily creep into these things, uh, such as any sort of spiritual mythology that's going to influence or come in as a new paradigm, you know. Because I'm not for dogma, and we've been through that lesson for thousands of years now. I think we should get past that already, and
Yeah,
grow the hell up.
my karma ran over my dogma, the old joke.
All right. That's a good one. Yeah, totally. Totally. Um, yeah, so yeah, that's it's great to explore that. And have you delved much into psychology at all as well? Like in your years of pursuing this sort of obviously your own healing and also your in pursuit of knowledge and what you're looking for in your life.
Yes, I would say so. My mother was her degree was in one of her degrees was in psychology, and she was a counselor. So I got it honest from an early age. I rebelled against it. I hated some of the terminology and some of the pigeonholing, but ultimately she was probably right about some of my behaviors and my where I was coming from. I could see that years later, of course. But yes, I mean, I grew up reading Jung, and later on, I was really into like Arnold Mindell, process-oriented psychology, and his amazing book called Dream Body, which is one of the best psychology books ever written. Just read Dream Body sometime; it'll simply blow your mind. It's so shamanic; it's not
Right.
even funny. So yeah, all lots of, I mean, tons of different psychological perspectives. But what I always felt was that it's kind of like the way that dreams line up for me, the dreaming, like what dreams are and how they're supposed to be used. And I always felt that where, what psychology, Western psychology always does is that it examines things with the mind without putting things into a kind of action mode. So
Mm,
you're analyzing your dreams. What do they mean? How do they relate to your life? Now, I absolutely loathe Freud's work. I think everything he said, with slight exceptions, or it was just completely off base. Who knows who was funding that guy? But the
yep.
some of the more archetypal interpretations that Jung began to work with, resonated greatly with me. And of course, a lot of that tracked into things like Joseph Campbell's work and looking at the hero's journey and looking at the archetypes. All of that's really, really great, but it still doesn't really teach you how to harness the power of your dreams.
Mm,
So for me, the highest level of psychology is well-informed shamanism
mm,
because it understands what dreams actually are and how to interface with them to know yourself and to heal yourself. And beyond that, even.
yep. Yep. That's beautifully put. I totally feel in line with those with that viewpoint too. Um, yeah, it has a because psychology has its limitations, doesn't it? I mean, there's a lot of truth in psychology in terms of some of the behavioral things that we see, but but like you said, when we get into things like dreaming and the more abstract parts of our experiences here in this realm, and really the deeper essence of it, uh, because ultimately when you even look up the word psyche, it means soul, and I feel like shamanism is soulology in that way.
I like that. I like that.
So yeah, I think you beautifully put that. Um, so in terms of uh, your your outlook on the dreaming side, what is your like in terms of like from what you've learned about dreaming, how far have you gotten with it, and also where do you see um where have you experienced the power and the energy coming from those teachings in yourself?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'm not a master lucid dreamer by any means. I've done it off and on for my life. I ended up writing a book about this phenomenon in snooze. So there's a kid who's, lucid dreaming, astral projecting, whatever you want to call it, traveling to the dream world. So I have thought about it, read a lot about it, had a variety of experiences. I didn't really take it on as an area of study, if you will, until relatively recently. When I say study, I mean experiential study, like going in, looking at different techniques for lucid dreaming, how to engage that world, how to travel in it, what things mean, and that sort of thing. So you get a ton of stuff, for example, from Castaneda, but a lot of it's kind of all over the place, and you don't actually know what to do with it. You're given some tips, find your hands, or wear a ring, or you put something on your solar plexus area, that kind of thing. But it really leaves a lot to be desired in terms of being like a manual for exploring the subconscious and unconscious realms. It's just it's too diffuse, it's too tangled and that sort of thing for it to be useful for a lot of people. And that's why I've been thankful for the work of people like Ken Eaglefeather, who have broke even regardless of whether he actually had any encounters with Don Juan. That's beside the point. What he did do was a masterful intellectual breakdown of the precepts of this kind of shamanism and how to do dreams and that kind of thing from that perspective. Then there's the Toll lineage that Sergio Magana is working in, and that is also all about, not all about, but largely about dreaming and how to dream. But there you actually begin to learn more about the landscape of dreams. You understand how the directions work and what different dreams mean, not from a biographical standpoint or anything like that, but whether the dream is tracking you back into old patterns that will keep repeating, or is taking you towards solutions and new avenues for experience. And you can learn what those directions are and what those signs and symbols are. And you can change the dream as it's happening, or you can cancel a dream that's happened that was taking you in a bad direction so that it doesn't contribute to those old patterns. And you're given all of these very pragmatic strategies for navigating in the dream space. And frankly, I'm finding it to be more useful as a framework than the Castaneda material. Now,
Wow.
having said that, I've been in a bit of a drought with my lucid dreaming.
Okay.
So I'm working on getting that back together. There's been a lot going on, and I've been doing some other practices, and I've wondered if some of that might be having an influence. For example, I've been doing a lot of darkness gazing, which is where
Right.
you go into a heightened awareness, and it feels like a very light lucid dream. So you can feel
Wow.
some of the popping, sizzling energy that you get when you go into a lucid dream, but it's less, and you are more conscious of your environment. Yeah, and yet you're definitely in a heightened state. And I've been playing with ways of inducing that. I found that right when you wake up in the morning, after recapitulating for a little bit, if you wear and this is some of this concept came from Joel. I had heard about it, but I wasn't exactly sure how it was done. But you can use like a mask, an eye mask, a sleep mask,
Right.
and if you can get more or less total blackout and it doesn't hurt your eyeballs, to do this, you can open your eyes under the mask and it's dark. And so you're staring into the darkness. And you're
Right.
fresh out of sleep. So you have all of that sleep energy that you're working with. And when you begin breathing and relaxing into that gazing, you begin to see the colors, the geometric forms, very often in purple and sometimes very bright purple, that begin to show up in
Yeah.
your vision kind of out of nowhere. Joel thinks that these are inorganic beings and that that you're having some kind of energy interface with the inorganic realm. And I think maybe he's right.
Wow. Wow. Are you talking about the patterns that you're seeing? The colored
Yes,
patterns?
yes. And it's very funny because they're almost always geometric in my experience.
Yeah.
But this is another really funny little piece where you look at the Magana work and the Toll lineage, and you get more data about how to recognize the type of beings that you're working with. There are two types of inorganic beings in that form of shamanism. It's also Mesoamerican. It's down, from Mexico and the Aztec world and all of that. But in this shamanism, the geometric beings are called Pipitlan. I believe that's what they are, Pipitlan or Pipotlan. And so they're geometric looking. And the ones that are more like archons are called Yayeli, and they don't have that geometry to their energy fields.
Right. Wow. That's fascinating. I mean, th that reminds me of how when working with I mean, I'm not sure whether you've taken a good dose of mushrooms, but you do see those patterns in the beginning. Um,
Very similar to that. And yes, I
yeah.
have done some of that, especially in my younger years. But yeah, it is actually
Yeah.
very similar. It tells me that you are accessing a different realm of reality by by moving your assemblage point. You can
Yeah,
do it. That's happening in dreams, and it's happening in lucid dreams even more, and it's happening a lot with mushrooms.
right. Do you feel like, or do you see that? I mean, mentioning these inorganic beings, do you think that they're kind of like they're in the way of you entering that infinite space, or how do you see that?
I think they have different purposes.
Right,
The Pipotlan, if that's how it's pronounced, these are like Nahual words, right? So
right.
it's not a language that I speak, but I've learned some words that I'm sure I'm butchering. But anyway, forgive me if you're very good at that. Um, the the Pipotlan are basically helpers, and they are way showers and helpers, and they can share their energy with you, and they are curious about people, and they would be equivalent to the allies in Castaneda's world, which are potentially synergistic beings or friendly. I will use the term friendly kind of in quotes because they're also, powerful and sometimes really scary, but they can be utilized productively in human interactions.
Right,
But then you have a whole other class of inorganic beings, which are like energy vampires and manipulators, and they range from almost like leprechaunish, small little guys that are just out to cause you trouble, all the way up to things like something like the mud shadows or the flyers or the AIX consciousness that would be a massive predatory consciousness that would be
right.
feeding on the human race.
Do you think that that's what happens when we sleep or go to sleep in the dark, when we're getting into that sort of alpha theta state, sort of awareness, that developing the like Don Juan was teaching Castaneda about becoming aware that you're falling asleep. Is that way of making sure you're kind of safeguarding yourself against these sort of entities, these archontic entities?
That's a really good question. A lot of people want to know that. And the answer to that question, I will say that you can wake up at any time. I
Right.
absolutely believe, and you can cancel your dreams. So you can learn how to do that by reading the Secret of Toltec Dreaming by Sergio Magana, and you can cancel out dreams that you might have had some kind of unpleasant interface, that people get afraid of energy attachments or entities or whatever. And I shared this one simple technique with somebody recently who did it, and they said it was amazing what it did for them. It completely released whatever energy they had taken on or that had messed with their own energy. And it's
Wow.
very powerful stuff, and it's super simplistic. I mean, essentially, when you identify a dream like that, you don't want to go south in your dreams. So
Right.
if you're going down, you don't want to go down. This takes you back into the realm of the dead called the Mictlan, where the ancestors live, but it's also where your patterns are held in place. And so if you're trying to change, to heal, to transform, to better yourself, then you don't want to spend time down in the Mictlan. You want to go up. And you
Right.
don't want to go to the left, which represents the west. You want to go, I believe, to the right, into the east, into the sunrise, basically, to have a new day. So you don't want to go into the setting sun area. So you're always steering up and west, up and to the right, wherever you are. It
Right.
doesn't really matter what position you are in your dream, or if you are a landscape, none of that matters. But if you detect that you're having a downward dream, or that you have an unpleasant dream, like with potentially some yellies coming after you, some little archontic beings,
Right.
then you cancel this. You can even do this while you're dreaming, which I've done, or you can do it after you wake up and you just visualize the dream above your head burning. Just burn the dream, and then let that energy then come down through the top of your head into your body in the form of an energized snake. It can even be like a snake of fire, and then the snake will move through your body. This only takes a minute or so. It doesn't take very long. Just let the snake move through your body all the way down to your feet, and then let it come out through a foot.
Mm.
While it's going through your body, it's cleansing your bones and blood of all of that dream energy. And then when you release that out of your body through the foot, then you stomp on the ground or the imaginary ground if you're lying down or you're sleeping. And then you ask the Earth Mother to take that energy and then you stomp again, and you ask her to do something beautiful with it. And that's it.
Wow.
That's the whole thing. So there are definitely ways not only to protect ourselves, we can always wake up, we can cancel dreams. And the other thing is that if you are ever having an encounter in the inorganic realm, the realm of dreams, your your word is your bond in that realm.
Mm.
So don't make contracts. You don't verbally make contracts or agree to do things. You might uh, follow a being, for example, somewhere back to their world. But you can always come back because you have not agreed to any kind of contractual relationship to be a part of their world. And the other thing is when you get into the Magana work, I mean, there are advanced practitioners of dreaming who are in these realms with the Yeli who are coming after them, but they've learned the tricks of the trade, and they'll wait for the Yeli to approach them, and then they'll chase the Yeli and take their energy.
Oh, wow. Wow, fascinating.
Very, very empowering. And
Yeah.
maybe that's unethical, but it's very widely practiced by people who do this. So
Mm. Wow, that's incredible. Um, yeah, I, I mean, there's so many questions I want to ask you. Eh, Going into this sort of realm of when, dreams and so on, and your kind of personal experiences with it as well. What's the most profound sort of thing you realized about experiencing dreaming?
yeah, that's a good question. I suppose it would be just how real the dream world is,
Right.
just how energized it is, and how you can feel it in your body, and then wake up still feeling it, and be energized by it all day long. I mean, one of the reasons that you do dreaming, lucid dreaming, and shamanism is to build your energy power. And when you can just feel it, having had that experience, and it's palpable, that is an amazing confirmation of not only the fact that you were having a lucid dream, that you were having a non-ordinary experience, but there is a kind of reality to that world that is quasi-tangible. It's something that you can experience in your own body and in your mind. So that is very life-changing, and it makes one, you begin to look at life, your waking world, as if it, okay, how much longer till I can go to sleep and go do something real for a change, because none of this shit's real that I'm doing right now. All of this
Yeah.
stuff, the internet, blah blah blah, all of it pure fantasy. What's real is the dream world.
Yep. Yep. I totally get that. I look forward to going to bed. More than any, like before I used to, not wanting like or enjoying sleep much, but since discovering the Toltec teachings and doing dreaming, it's like it's something to look forward to at the end of each day. You're
It's
going into a
true. And
different
you don't
world.
have to go into a full lucid one either. A lot of people think, well, I'm not very good at this. Well, it does take people a long time. And you also go through droughts. And if you're doing other activities, you might be using that dreaming energy in different ways.
Right.
The main thing is to not get hung up on it, but to continue making lots of lifestyle decisions that contribute to your cultivating your own energy, your balance, your harmony, your centeredness, so that you build up the ability to more actively engage the dream environment. And when you do that, then you'll get more energy to bring back into your waking environment. Then that'll start to change the waking environment. And then you can take that energy back into the dreaming environment. And it's like a free energy device that you're creating.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. I mean, like this is the thing with about energy as well. Like you've got to, with energy and with dreaming, you're and talking about these inorganic beings as well, because obviously you can take on negative or bad energy that will cause you problems in this world, right?
That's true, but I would say this, that really you you don't have to take it on. Like I said, there are these
Right.
strategies for not having to take it on, and I think that people's mindset is plays a huge role in what kinds of experiences they have in their dreams. And if you're going in with a fearful mindset, you're likely to attract fearful experiences. But there are very strange aspects to the dreaming world that you're not often told. For example, Magana points out that dreams of death, like your death, even
Yeah.
violent death, usually are very positive because
Wow.
they signify a kind of transformation and a new beginning in your present life. That's what they're actually heralding. So people get so in their heads and in their anxieties and fear about, all this dreaming stuff or whatever. And a lot of it's the religious programming and all the witchcraft and the evil darkness and all this kind of thing. The ultimate expression and cultivation of power in the tall lineage is the number 20. It's the 20th thing that you do on the path of enlightenment or whatever you want to call it. They don't call it that.
Right.
But at the 20th level, it is the completion moment when you learn how to go to sleep and dream in total darkness without dreaming.
Wow. So that becomes conscious then, completely conscious.
You
You're not
become
fully asleep.
the creator. You basically have turned into the eagle at that moment.
Wow. Wow. That's something to take away and reflect on. Yeah. I'm integrating that. Yeah, that's quite profound. That's quite profound. Yeah. I mean that's what the third attention is in a way then, right? That's what the third
That would
attention
be
is.
the gateway to the third attention. So the second attention, or the first attention is here of the tonal. The second attention is the Nagwal, the world of dreams. And then what's beyond that's the third attention, which is the consciousness of the creator.
Yeah. Which
And
is
the whole
both
point
the
of this is
first and
sort
the
of learning
second.
how to die. Oh, yeah. You were saying the first and the second?
Make the third. I think Joel mentioned it as well, like the first and the second make make access to when you're able to use those two to go into the third, right?
Yeah, I see it that way too. I know that Ken Eaglefeather sees it that way. What you're doing is essentially you're making what he calls a natural field. So we don't have a natural field because we have the tonal and the nawal are totally separated.
Right.
And this is not only true in the Castaneda Don Juan work, it's true in the Magana work as well, that we have this separation of church and state, as it were, within our beings. The goal is to bring them together so that there is one field. It's something that Ken Eaglefeather calls a natural field. And basically, it's where you are being. And when you are being what is, not projecting what is, you're being it. And that's when you are sort of sleeping in that dark dream without dreaming. You are simply in pure existence mode and you access the consciousness and the power of the creative being, the creator.
Right. That's that again, that kind of brings me back to the whole concept of the power of or what we seemingly give power to in the sense of when we call the god of this world being Satan or the Gnostic demiurge, you know, in a way, like, is it truly that? Is it really that? You know, if we are living in this realm and we're able to tap into that infinite being, source, whatever you want to call it, you know, is it really then, you know,
Right.
the god of this world?
Right. Is it really the God of this world?
Yeah,
I guess I guess we need to determine what world we're living in as individuals, right? It's certainly not the God of the world that I find myself moving into, but I think it is maybe the God of the world that most people live in.
the collective, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So in a way, you're having an assemblage point with God itself or the
I
Godhead.
like that. Yeah, yeah, sure. Sure,
Right?
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if you want to think of the concept of this predatorial consciousness, whether it's the demiurge or AIX or the mud shadows or the flyers, whatever we want to call this,
Yep.
uh, then that is the God of this world. It's really what's I believe it is what's installing a kind of foreign language construct using the consonants and that sort of thing into human perception. I believe that's part of the That's part of the programming that a lot of people are picking up on. And you have like Matt over at Quantum of Conscience talking about the human download, all these people who are getting the human download, and it's what keeps them acting like NPCs or animals or non-humans. Just pick somebody in the news, and they're
Yeah.
probably one of those descriptions. And so this human download is what keeps all of this thing going, so that that predatory consciousness can feed on our energy. So it is the God of this world. But for people who are moving into another world, maybe into the third, towards the third attention, that's the ultimate goal. People who are on that shamanic path and who are actually taking that seriously, they begin to shed the influence of that predatory consciousness,
Mm.
which no longer can feed on them and no longer can control their lives. And after a while, I think that consciousness no longer has a meaningful impact on those
Right.
people. Not to say that you ever stop being alert and aware and working on yourself and all of these things that would contribute to building your energy. I think that's the state of being a warrior, to use a Don Juan term. You're always going to be a warrior if you're on this path. There are no vacations.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. There's always you're always warding, really. You're warding off that AIX or Satan or whatever, that consciousness, that parasitic uh part that's kind of been installed in our consciousness, field of consciousness. Is
It
that what
really
you mean?
Yeah, it is what I mean. And I was
Yeah.
just going to add that the one of the things that a lot of people, especially, I love, so funny, I love it. Matt's terminology is hilarious at Quantum of Conscience. He calls a lot of these people first grade truthers. And so the first grade truthers are these, good guy, bad guy thing, AIX is this bad, evil thing that's just out to get us, and we're its victims, and we're in a soul trap. And so you have all these first grade truthers just talking a bunch of just, puerile nonsense, really.
Yep.
The warrior on this path, while recognizing that there is an adversary, they also honor and give thanks to the adversary. This is what martial artists do when they're being proper martial artists. You really honor the adversary and give thanks for the adversary. It allows the best in you to come out.
Yep.
And so the
Totally.
adversary is actually a tremendous gift. It's the ultimate tyrant in that kind of petty tyrant way of looking at things in shamanism. It's the ultimate assemblage point mover.
Right. Yeah. Because without it, there is no growth. There is no, uh, I guess, what people call ascension or whatever, to get out, to move beyond the this realm into the third.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So if you pair that knowledge and that mindset with using death as your advisor so that it spurs you to use your time wisely as a warrior on this path, then
Mm.
you can create lots of momentum. I have a someone that I know who's had lots of mental problems for a while. And I mean, just I know them well. It's just I
Mm.
know this person very well, and there's been lots of mental issues, a lot of kind of OCD stuff, fear, anxiety, and everything. And after they started just mostly just recapitulating for several months, they're like a totally different human being.
Wow. Goes to show
So
this stuff works.
it works. It
Yeah.
simply works. What I was really happy to be able to do with Regenetics was to give this amazing jump start to your energy, and to give people the chance for some potentially rapid detoxification and healing, strengthening, fortifying, that would take people to new possibilities where they could pursue other paths. Maybe
Mm.
you get onto a martial arts path or a shamanic path or some other very empowering path, and you use all of this boost to go to just new plateaus in your own experience. It was really a wonderful thing to kind of put the regenetics work and, in this case, my case, the shamanism together and not see them as somehow unrelated. They're almost part of a continuum in my way of
Mm.
looking at it.
Wow. Definitely want to look more into that, Sol. You've been very generous with your time. I really appreciate your sharing and your wisdom. Um, I want to end this with a more of kind of like what has been large, very positive, and for you as well. What advice can you give to anyone or even yourself in terms of when we are faced with this adversary? What is the what one advice, or what advice can you give for those who are still kind of new to this path?
Mm. Yeah, I get asked that, in a lot of interviews, and I'm just going to say what I always say because the wisdom of it has never changed. I've never perceived that it doesn't work or that it's bad advice and it's so bloody simple. It's Joseph Campbell's advice to follow your bliss. Because when you do that, you automatically put yourself in a positive mindset with positive energy, doing things that you're passionate about. You're getting on your path with heart. You're moving your assemblage point. You're adding to your chi, your energy. You're having better relationships and better experiences. And all of this can just simply snowball and snowball. So
Mm,
rather than thinking that you have to get on the shamanic path and be a warrior, if you're not there, who cares? Start by identifying what you love and doing it. And see if your
mm,
life doesn't begin to change dramatically if you haven't been doing it.
beautiful, beautiful. Any closing thoughts, words you'd like to share before we bring this podcast to a close?
Well, I would like to thank you for having me on and for sharing your time and your wisdom and gnosis. It's always really fun to talk. I think we both have a feeling that we could talk all night long
Yeah.
about a million different things. So at some point in time, yeah, you bookend the conversation, but this is just really great. Really, some of my it's been our chats have been two of my most memorable and enjoyable chats that I've had in the YouTube world, and just want to honor you and thank you very much.
Likewise, Sol, I honor you and thank you as well for your presence and your time and your energy. Really appreciate you, and I hope it's reciprocated always.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, let's not let this be our last.
Of course, no, there'll be more for sure.
Oh,
Thank you,
that's
Sol.
good. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Okay.